Hello guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto was the Blue Knight and got Harem? Part 1. Huge shout out to X10 Shadow Fox for this story. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. Night. The stars shine, the moon was full as the night sky illuminated the earth. Normally it was show of a beautiful array of consolation show. Unfortunately, the beautiful night that most would enjoy is nothing more than help illuminate the ground as the sounds of battle cries and screams are heard throughout the land. In one valley, the sounds of fighting was heard everywhere with the clashing of swords, shields, and crying pain. The battle was coming from three separate armies from three separate groups of supernatural groups. One group was that of light that came from heaven, led by the biblical god, the angels. The second force came from the underworld, led by the four great satans, the devils. Finally, the third group, that was consisted of fallen ones, led by the strongest of all fallen ones, Azazel, the fallen angels. The angels originated from heaven who are powerful beings that serve the biblical god and have the power to inflict pain upon devils demons due to their light-based powers. However, as powerful as they are pure beings that follow the ways of the biblical god has set. The devils come from the underworld where they were led by the four great satans. Lucifer, Leviathan, Beelzebub, Asmodeus. They are strong since they use multiple dark magic, such as ice, fire, etc. Lastly, fallen angels are angels that have fallen from the grace of God due to having impure thoughts that divert them from the teachings of the God in the Bible. They call themselves the Grigori group. They look like angels, except their wings are black and have no halos above their heads. As the battle continued on, in the center of the battlefield, a sudden explosion of such power suddenly appeared, pushing all three sides back a bit. The ones that were in the center of the explosion were killed while those that were knocked back wondered on what it was. It was suddenly one of the fallen angels yelled out loud while pointing his weapon into the sky, getting all those close to the person to look up and pay attention. Suddenly, a sapphire flame, with glittering red sparks coming from the end of its tips, came down on the battlefield by the light of the moon. The flame soon disappeared as it slowed down to reveal an armor body with four pairs of azure, silver angel-like wings that look like it's made of steel. The body was armored in a unique way. Like a knight of Middle Ages, but was designed differently with the body being white. The chest plate was black as night with a red and blue outlines in several parts. His right arm held an Excalibur with its sheath behind the back. On the waist, there were two small short swords like daggers with their sheaths that stop mid-thigh. X-28 Strike Freedom. Gundam Seed but more Middle Age. When each members of the army saw the suit of armor fly down from them, the commanding leaders knew who it was. "It's the Blue Knight," one devil said. With the arrival of the Blue Knight, several of them stopped fighting with each other, where they turned their attention to the newcomer. To the three factions, the Knight is considered to be an enemy. For the devils and fallen angels, the Knight has slain several of their promising and prodigy members. The angels needed to kill the Knight because, even though the Knight fought against devils and fallen angels, the Knight also defeated several members of the elite Seraph, recently Michael. The armies quickly engaged on the Knight, but the Knight moved so fast that many didn't see where it flew. The Knight flew with incredible speed and agility that many believed it was teleportation of some kind. The Knight quickly flew into the center of the battle where he started to shoot energy blasts of holy and demonic powers on all. The accuracy was incredible that the Knight shot only at the arms, legs, wings, and non-vital areas where it won't cause death. In one point, it fired several shots of magical beams at everyone, taking them out of the battle. It was around this time that the current commanders of battle came towards the Knight. The Knight saw this and flew into the sky where the commanders flew up as well. The battle of the three versus the Knight was intense. The commanders of the angel and fallen angels have 5 pairs of wings, while the devil was known to be at the same level. The Knight fought each three with incredible skill and strength that many down at the battlefield actually stopped to see the battle. Through great skill and determination, the Knight sliced right through the fallen angel commander in half with its Excalibur, impaling the devil with the same sword while fighting the angel a bit more before they fired upon each other, where the Knight blasted through with a second shot that continued on and hit the angel's right arm and 2 wings, while the second shot hit the left leg and 2 lower wings. With the final commander taken out, the second in command saw that Knight was ready to continue fighting as it came down on them. With this, they ordered each of their forcers to retreat since their main commanders were defeated and the battle became unfavorable to them, as well as to report the incident to their higher command. Most retreated while others stayed in hopes to turn the battle in their favor, devils and fallen angels, but were quickly silenced by the Blue Knight. With the forces temporarily withdrawn from the battlefield, the Blue Knight quickly flew into the full moon and disappeared. The Blue Knight, or the Knight of Life and Death, is an unknown, legendary warrior in the earth as the Knight appeared nearly 10 years ago. None of the three factions doesn't know on who the knight really is, since the aura of the knight always disappeared like the shadows and would only appeared when the three forces would battle each other near land that were inhabited by humans, such as kingdoms or small villages. During those times, the knight would enter in the middle of the battlefield and fight everyone that it can possibly can. The three factions already knew that the knight's power was that of a sacred gear, but they haven't got a clue on where it appeared or who created, since God, himself, never created such a thing. They believed it was created by something else or a longevity that was hidden in the world. The only thing that was certain was that the Blue Knight was danger to the three factions since it attacked anyone and barely left anyone alive except the angels, but they received serious injuries. 1 year later. It was the final battle, as the armies of heaven, underworld and Grigori group fought in a tremendous battle on the earth, so tremendous that any living human that was nearby would be scorched alive from the holy demonic aura clashing at each other for 3 days straight. As the battle continued on, in the middle of the rampage a large, ring-like, circle was occupied by only 10 beings. The 10 beings that were fighting each other were the 5 top leaders in Grigori, the 4 great Satans, and the biblical god of Christianity. The fighting between the leaders were so powerful that many couldn't get near, that only their top generals or right-handed men were able to get in. But as the battle continued to go on with the deaths of many brave warriors, the battle changed dramatically as out of nowhere, the three factions were completely struck by a powerful blast that created a path. It was then that those that paid attention saw the Blue Knight appeared again. Those that saw it attack in all directions but weren't able to hit the knight since the way it flew was made it impossible. The knight flew directly at the center of the battlefield where God and the Satans were fighting with each other. Knight brought its arms up in an X shape where a barrier shield appeared and collided into the wall of powers to break through. Once in, he saw the deities and began its assault on each one of them. The 4 great Satans saw who it was where they hurt on the Blue Knight. They knew if the knight didn't get itself involved in several past battle, they would have gotten an upper hand on the war. They knew that the knight had to die for ruining many of their plans. The fallen angels saw the knight and had similar thoughts where they too had to kill the Blue Knight. The biblical God, who was 3 times taller than any man, knew the knight from the reports from his subordinates, including Michael, that he was responsible for injuring his angels in battle, not killing any of them. Like the Satans, the knight stopped several advances in the past that had caused them to advance their attacks on the devils and fallen angels. The battle continued on as the forces of each factions attacked each other, including the Blue Knight. In the battle, the knight had taken down the top commanders of each group, including Michael, but not without sustaining severe injuries. Several armor plates were destroyed and blood coming out from inside the armor. But even with great pain and lack of energy, the knight continued to fight until only the knight, the 4 great Satans, and God were the only ones to be able to keep fighting. It was around this time that God and the Satans decided to make their final attack on each other, but stopped when they saw the Blue Knight sudden become golden. The next thing that happened was only the top commanders, which were still alive. See what happened next. The knight new transformed state quickly moved with such speed that no one saw what happened until it was too late. In this one move, the knight flew behind 2 of the great Satans and pierced their hearts with its bare fists, no gauntlet real skin, killing them while their black blood splashed around. Everyone was shocked on what just happened that the other 2 Satans didn't know on what happened until it was too late. The knight pulled out its hands from the Satan's body and quickly moved and fired several energy shots at everyone, forcing them to scatter. It was then that the last 2 Satans were caught in surprise as the knight drew out its Excalibur and slice, then plunged deeply into the last 2, killing them while the black blood from them splashed all over the knight. God and the fallen angels couldn't believe on what just happened. They of course figured out that this power must be a special god-killing mode. In less than a minute, the knight killed the Satans, but suddenly dropped to the ground near the leader of the downed fallen angel, Azazel. The armor of the knight has all but disappeared as the only thing left was the face mask. The knight was completely weakened that it couldn't move at all. The biblical god was the only one left to be able to move. He walked, with a sword in hand, with an ominous present in front of Azazel and the knight. The god approached them as Azazel looked up at his former leader. "Ha ha ha, I guess this is it for me, huh?" Azazel said with a grin on his face. "You have betrayed the path of light with your desires and rebellious actions. I'm sorry to say that it is time that you pay for your sinful ways," God said. Before I go, you mind if you show me on who the Blue Knight really is, as I'm just curious as you are," Azazel requested. God didn't acknowledge Azazel, but was curious to know on who the knight is. The Almighty God walked and lifted the person by their neck with his left hand. God pulled and threw the knight's armor mask away to reveal the person's face. God and Azazel looked to see that it was a young boy in their late teens to early 20s with blonde spiky hair. The boy had a face that could attract many young women to him. God examined the boy to see on what this boy powers really is, but couldn't find an answer, since he can sense a sacred gear, but wasn't able to tell on how it was created or where it originated, but could feel a familiarity that he couldn't put. Azazel looked at the young boy and could see that he was out cold, wasn't able to defend himself. As he stared, he heard God speak up. Strange, I can sense both light and darkness in his soul, yet can't sense any evil or good in him. But in any case, he must be punished for his sins. God said. Oh, and what sins would that be? He killed many devils and fallen angels, while leaving only injured angels to you. The way he fought, you should be thanking him for killing your greatest enemies. Azazel panted out on what he said. He still sinned by hurting my loyal ones and stirring people away from my lessons of purity. I will assure that, like you, he will not find peace. Just like Adam and Eve, he will face my wrath for all the sins he has placed upon himself. Where God has his sword, in his right hand, ready to pierce through the young man's heart. I guess this is it. Azazel thought as he closed his eyes to not see the death of the young boy and waited for his turn. The next sound that he heard was a piercing and splashing sound. Azazel sighed as he opened his eyes to see God one more time. He thought he should go out with at least one more act of rebellion, not matter how silly it is, which is why he was ready to spit on God's face. However, when he opened his eyes, he was not prepared on seeing this scene. Azazel looked stunned at the unbelievable scene in front of him. Michael and the other seraph angels were finally able to come out of being unconsciousness to see on what happening. It was there in their own horror and disbelief on the scene in front of them. The high-ranking devils that were there also, that weren't killed by the night, finally regained consciousness. God had his sword ready to strike as he brought the young boy in front of his face, that held an angry yet saddened face on him. He held the boy straight as he got his large sword ready in one motion. It was here that he began his thrust to only stop right before the tip of blade could touch the boy's chest, since he felt something was wrong. He looked down to see the boy, in his right hand, holding a golden dark sword with a similar aura that killed the Satans. However, along the blade had the blood of the 4 great Satans covered the blade as it pierced God's heart. In that moment, God fell on one knee then on both, where he let go of the boy, who regained consciousness just in time to put all his strength to create the golden dark sword that killed the Satans, along with their blood to pierce God's heart. God's grip of the boy loosened up as he fell on top of him, as well as letting go of his sword. Everyone then heard whimpering and huffing. They then saw that it was the boy as he was crying. It's finally over, the boy said as his tears ran down. It's tea time, me thought you paid for why your sins, my lord. Stuttered the young boy, where everyone, including God himself, widened their eyes at what the young boy said. Naruto Shippuden asked. Decision. As God's life began to fade away, he saw the boy's eyes to see nothing but pain, sadness, all the feelings of sorrow. Before he could say anything, the boy continued on. You add the stuttering, whimpering talk here. You have to die for all those who believe in you, for all those who had faith in you, for all those who continue to worship you, and for all those that despise and hated you, he cried out as more and more tears ran down his face. You're supposed to be the bringer of hope and peace, to show us the way to save our souls, and yet you let so many suffer because of your war. For 100 years, so many have prayed to have them answered, yet at the same time you have failed to help those who asked for your protection where they abandon you. You can feel too, can you, this power, the power of humanity, the power of light and darkness, the hopes and rage of all the people in your world. He cried out. It was at this moment, God could hear from the boy's sword the voices of the bliss and anger of the rejected that followed his faithful words. I thank you for blessing my family with this meal, my lord, said a young woman praying to him in bliss. I prayed for you and you do not answer me. I have faith that you will deliver us from this darkness. Or are you testing my faith after I lost my family? I pray to you to give me back my children at least, please, my lord, said the same woman as she cried out in sorrow for the death of her children. More and more cries of sorrow and anger continue as more and more thanks for the blessing that they received by them. There were so many people with their hopes and their hatred for him that even he couldn't help but be amazed on it. It was there that God knew what this power was. This power was the hope and despair of humanity, where their hearts finally gave birth to their own savior and avenger. And I have suffered as will, I lost my family, but gained friends, I lost my friends, but gained a new home, and so forth. I had to listen to all of them cry out in pain for your help, but never received it. I had to watch, as many lived in pain or grief. It was there that I decided to fight, and in that fight I felt it, I could feel a powerful force taking me, and then I awakened with this power. I then knew what this power was for, that's why I did what I did, and now at what am I doing? I had to use this power to kill the 4 great Satans, and you, the young boy cried out. I had to kill you, or the happiness and pain of those who were sacrificed in your name, and this war of yours can finally rest in peace. That's why I was given this power to slay you, and that's my decision as one of your children since you forced me to do this. The boy finished as he continued to sob. All those around the two couldn't believe on what the boy has just cried out. In a way, what the boy was saying was actually right. Their thought stopped as the boy continued on. You forced us all to create this power and for me to carry the burden, a burden that I will never be forgiven, and that's why even now I hate you, but still I ask you for forgiveness, the boy, as he cried louder like a child. God's long white hair covered his eyes that only the boy could see his face. God brought his right hand at the blonde's face while his mouth began to bleed out while his blood continued to leak out from the sword where the blade finally pierced all the way through his body. With one last breath, God lowered his face to the boy where the boy widened his eyes for a moment as he began to cry even harder. It was then that God's hand on the boy's face fell to the ground as he gone motionless. The boy huffed a bit more before he screamed so loud into the sky above him. With one quickly and violent motion the boy swung his sword up, creating a large slash out of God's body, where his blood hit his own body. With that God's body was thrown of him and landed face up, dead. The boy looked at God's, now, dead body with his sword held in both hands above him, which he shook in sorrow. His tears continued to pour out before he decided to just leave. He used whatever strength he had left to change his sword into a pair of his wings and flew into the night sky. Michael, Azazel, and the devils tried to get to him, but he had already left. And Ost. The armies outside the circular ring felt the sudden loss of the Satan leaders and high-ranking fallen angels, where the angels cheered while the devils and fallen angels shook in disbelief, knowing that if their leaders are dead then God will come out and kill them. But before any more thoughts could come up, everyone felt God's life fleeting before it disappeared as well. Everyone around was shocked on what they were sensing. It wasn't long before they all saw one figure fly away, where they saw the blue wings, knowing that was the Blue Knight. Not long after sensing the loss of the leaders, everyone paid attention to the center of the battlefield to see Michael, Azazel, and the devils walked out. Before things could go along, one fallen angel yelled out to his fellow fallen ones to continue the fight, since he can see from the expression on Michael and his subordinates, along with the devils, that both God and the four great Satans were dead. The fallen would have attack, but Azazel stopped them, saying that there is now a ceasefire on all sides. When the knight left, Michael with his fellow high-ranking seraph, Azazel and fellow surviving comrades and the devils, walked to the center of the fallen leaders. Gabriel ran towards God's body as she held him close while crying out in disbelief. The blonde beauty cried for the loss of their savior, while Michael and the other angels looked saddened for their loss. The devils were also saddened for losing their leaders. It was then that Azazel took pity and called for a ceasefire on all sides, where they agreed, since they all want to mourn for their lost leaders. With the announcement, all of them were hesitant, but then saw the bodies of God and the Satans being carried out. The fallen angel that wanted to continue, Azazel stopped, since Azazel was the commander of the Grigori and ordered all his comrades to head back to headquarters or any of their bases for further orders. In the end, the Great War had finally ended in a horrible way. Far from the battlefield, the young blonde finally landed in a remote region that used to be a battlefield from the three factions. He walked up to several graves where he continued to cry, since in front of him was the graves of his family, father, mother, brothers and sisters. The night was filled with nothing but tears of pain and mourn. 3 years later. It was high noon as people from a small village in Austria were busy working. In the main marketplace, men and women were busy with their own work or living conditions, while their children helped out or played around. In the midst of the crowded area, one person wearing a wool cloak walked through the crowd with an emotionless look on his face. He used part of the cloak as a hood, but few in the crowd were able to the person's face. The person in question was the blonde-hair warrior, also known only to the three factions as the Blue Knight. It's been 4 years since that fateful yet dark day where he killed both the four great Satans and God himself. Since then, he has changed in both body and personality. The young warrior was now in his early to mid-20s that stood 6 feet tall. His blonde hair grew a bit longer, still being spiky while having a short bangs on his side to frame his face. As he walked through the village, he can't help but think on how much the earth has changed since the days of his lost childhood. Past. Back when he barely is able to remember his life, 4 years old, he remembered a time when things for him were completely different, peaceful, filled with days of joy and happiness alongside his parents and siblings, not having a care in the world. Those days, he remembered that every morning and every night, his family would gather together and pray to the Lord in thanks for giving them their bliss. His home back then wasn't much, had the basic necessities while having the beauty of nature surrounding them. In a way, his family believed that God had given them or allowed them to live in the eternal garden that the Bible has written down. As a boy, he was completely blessed since living with his family and happiness, back then, was the only thing he ever wished for, and thank God for it every day. Of course, that peaceful reality didn't last long ever since the night he lost everything. It was the middle of the night as he was asleep along his brothers and sisters while his parents were in another room. They were so deep in sleep that none of them didn't hear the sounds of footsteps coming towards them. Outside the scrawny home, a group of fallen angels were moving in silence as they came to find a place to hide themselves. The reason they were trying to hide was that a larger group of devils were after them. At some distance, there was a small quarrel where the devils and fallen angels fought against each other, where the fallen angels that were able to last the longest retreated in order to regroup and escape, where they found the small home and thought it would a good place to hide. As they went in to hide, a few looked around to see it was inhabited by a family, but didn't care for it since they wanted to live. They decided to leave the family alone since if the devil sees the dead human bodies, they'll know that they might be nearby. Going inside the building, one of them saw the cross of Christ on one of the walls. He informed the others, which told them that this was a house of Christianity believers. They had to leave immediately since this could alert the angels of heaven on their whereabouts. As they tried to leave, one of the devils spotted them, which sparked a battle all over again. The sounds of battle that started awakened the family from it. The parents looked out to see that it was battle of supernatural beings. They quickly went to their children to get them out of here and into a safe place. As the family tried to leave, one of the devils was thrown near them, where the father had his wooden pitchfork, along with a cross, to defend his family. He told them to run into the woods for safety. Devil saw the man with a weapon and cross, and though he was an enemy, he quickly attacked and killed the father. The mother and her children ran but heard the sound of a man being killed. The father died on the spot where his children cried, while the mother quickly let go of her grief since the battle continued on. She quickly moved them into the woods, but was suddenly struck by a rogue blade of light, killing her. The now orphan children were shocked and saddened about this. They were too frightened to move. The only thing they can do was just pray, which they did, leaving them undefended. A few fallen angels and devils brought the fight towards them, where their clash was going to hit the children. Just as they were about to hit, another power blocked them, forcing them to back off. In the sky, a bright light appeared, where the children thought it was the sun. It was then that a group of angels descended down to the ground. These angels were nearby when they felt the prayers of the young children, as well as the feeling of battle. They originally had no purpose on fighting the two sides, but could sense the innocence of the children and quickly came to their aid. But the angels' arrival, the battlefield increase. The leader of the angel group ordered two of them to guide the innocent children to safety, while the rest provided cover and support to assure they left unharmed as they deal with the devils and fallen angels. The two angels got the children to run towards the woods towards the nearby river. As they ran, their guardians were forces away from attacks by one of the fallen ones that separated them. In the skirmish, a powerful demonic blast came out of nowhere which hit the children dead on except for one. In one desperate move, the older sibling threw his youngest brother into the sky, where the shockwave of the blast threw him into the river, where he was carried away as he struggled to stay alive. As the morning sun began to shine on the land, the young 4-year-old was on the riverbank just a bit of distance from his home, but still recognized from his time with his father. He started to walk upstream to get back home. It took him about a quarter of the day because of his small body, but was able to make it. When he got back home, the only thing he saw was his home was now destroyed. He walked around till he found several graves with the cross of Christ. It was on their graves that made the boy suddenly cry, since on the graves, he can see his family wooden crosses, that even he had one, being on it. He can't tell since along with cross, some beads were on the rope that acted both as a pendant or wristband. As he cried, he pulled out his wooden cross that was around his neck and began to pray. "Oh Lord, Puis, bring back Mama, Papa, my brothers, my sisters," cried the young boy as he prayed as best he could, as he was now all alone. After the fight, several more angels arrived to help those that were still alive. The ones alive felt the battle along with the innocent Christian family that was praying for help. The angel doesn't know on what happened to the children, where he pointed out that they were going near the river. One investigated to only tell them news on that the children were killed. This saddened them, especially from the remains of the home, that these people were strong in belief to the Lord, given the Christian items around the house. The only thing they could do was gather their bodies, bury them with their crosses, and pray that the Lord will be kind-hearted on letting the family live in heaven. The boy had stopped praying when his prayers weren't being answered. He decided to head over to a friend of his parents, who were also Christians, that lived not far from here. It took another couple of hours before he made it, where his parents' friends learned on what happened to their friends. Well, learn as much from a 4-year-old. They took in the boy and made him a part of their family, along with their own 2 children, since they knew that their old friends would like that. It was another 2 years where the boy and his new adopted family had left the secluded area to look for a more peaceful place in a large village or kingdom, as well for the husband to look for work, where this time, the boy learned another harsh lesson in life and questioned his faith. The family had moved to a small village where they lived a pretty decent life, which the family continued to follow the path of Christianity. However, faith is not always answered. At one point, the father had gotten sick, where the mother and her oldest child had to go to work, while the 2 young ones were left to take care of the home. As things were getting tough, their employment was cut off, which made food scarce for them. Things were getting pretty bad until the nightmare reappeared once again. Human bandits used the cover of night to start an attack on the small village. Many fought to defend, yet many has fallen in the bandits' attack. The blonde boy and his new siblings were able to escape, but the parents had died. It was also during this attack that the blonde had learned experience his first great sin. In order to defend his new siblings, who were 2 to 4 years older than him, he has taken a life. He and his siblings were running away from a burning village that they were living. He and his new siblings were separated from their parents. As they ran to escape the chaos, he and his siblings got trapped in a corner where one of the bandits managed to corner them. The 2 older siblings were too scared to move, while the young blonde shook in fear at the situation. He looked around to see that the only thing around was a discarded wooden farm fork at his feet. The bandit ran up to them with a wooden club ready to strike at them. It was then that the young boy quickly picked up the fork, at the last second, directly at the bandit where he unintentionally ran into, impaling himself where the bandit died. The young blonde saw what happened where he began to shake in disbelief. The only thing he wanted to do was protect his new siblings, but not take a life. In that moment, his older siblings were able to shake off the trauma for the moment, where they quickly got the young spiky blonde and left. Once again orphaned, the 3 walked together throughout the night till early morning. For the next 3 days, they traveled the woods with no food or water. They would have died if it wasn't by luck or some kind of deity force that led them to a traveling caravan of people. The 3 were found by the people and given food and water. The people asked them if they want to join them once they heard the story about their village, which they agreed. For the next 6 years, the young blonde along with his siblings traveled the land while learning about life and continuing with their Catholic ways. During that time, the spiky blonde boy was finally able to deal his first kill, but still prayed for forgiveness to God for his sin. The 3 children traveled all of Europe. From Frankish Empire to the Slavonic tribes, traveling south between the border of Adalkusu and Kingdom of Chaz. Moving down further south towards the Middle East, then turned back north through the East Roman Empire to Italy. During the travels, the young girl learned from her fellow female travelers on how to cook, make clothing and such. The oldest male sibling learned navigation and fishing. The young spiky blonde did the only thing he knew he had to do. From memory, he knew that he was weak and needed to get strong. From the traveling caravan, he found some all-trained soldiers or warrior and learned how to fight. The blonde learned swordsmanship, tactics, hand-to-hand moves from veteran soldiers and such. He was able to put his skills through the test when the caravan was attacked a few times where seasoned and new-coming fighters protected from surprise attacks. Even though there was losses, the 3 siblings were able to survive this and countless other attacks that came. It was through this that the spiky blonde boy was baptized in combat. It wasn't long before all this was put through the true test, fighting against the supernatural world. After years since the death of his first family, the angels, devils and fallen angels started another battle where they were at the center of. Over the years, the blonde boy had heard stories of the battles of the supernatural world that's been going on Earth while traveling in the caravan. From the people that they encounter, the devil and fallen angels has increased their fighting against each other. God and his angels have fought against the other 2 factions in order to stop the fighting on the Earth's surface, but nothing has changed except the loss of lives, including humans, destruction of homes, and loss of food continue to increase throughout the world. With all this, it also makes question about his faith in the biblical God, given the state of the world. The battle was destructive as the people in the caravan ran for their lives, where families separated from other families to ensure their safety, which the angels helped as best they could. The blonde boy ensured that his older siblings were able to get away as he watched their backs. He carried a sword and shield. His training paid off as he sliced any devil or fallen angel that came too near them for comfort. The boy was too caught up that he failed to notice the magic blast that struck him and blown him away, along with his sword and shield. He struggled himself up as he then saw a light blade spear from a fallen angel came at him. Through great willpower and pain, he caught the blade spear in his hands. He let go as he dropped it and himself to the ground. As he laid there, barely able to move, it was there that he began to reevaluate his beliefs and his teachings. Why? Why is this happening again? He thought as he looked at the burning and dead bodies that was going around him, reminding him on that night so many years ago. I've prayed and follow his teachings just like I was taught by my parents, yet everywhere I go, there was trouble or sadness, pain and misery from those who didn't do anything wrong while following and accepting God's way. So why is this happening? He told himself. He continued to think about this as his heart and mind began to revolutionize on the whole idea of the Catholic way. After thinking about it so much that he decided to fight against not only against the devils and fallen angels, but also God himself. If no one is able to stop this war, this constant state of endless fighting, then I'll do it, even if I have to do it all alone, the blonde boy thought. In his mind, he awaked something. He felt like he just awakened some kind of power within himself. The boundaries of good and evil, light and darkness, right and wrong were now broken within him. You could say he achieved his own mental balance break. His senses and strength increase as he fought the devils and fallen angels with incredible speed and strength, but it wasn't enough. He yelled at them to stop fighting, since this was a meaningless confrontation for the earth, but none would listen. Another spear of light came at him, where he caught it and actually able to wield and use it, even with his hands burning because of the power. A demonic power blast came right towards him, where he used the light spear blade that was burning his hands to block it. When the attacks collide with the defense, he could feel as both light and dark powers were entering his body. His current mentality was already at its peak, and with the power going through his body, something else has awakened. In that moment, a powerful explosion occurred directly where he was, where everyone else didn't pay any mind to it, since the battle still wage on. He is currently drifting in an endless void of time or space, void of anything but mixtures of colors in the light and dark. Even though he was drifting in this void, his thoughts weren't in his current predicament, but what's still on his thoughts about God and his faith as a Catholic. He thought of the good that God brought to mankind, yet he also thought on who he left out, abandoned, and sacrificed to do. How his teachings didn't work with everyone. Where people are still fighting for their lives, either by the supernatural or by people who abandoned their faith or were only shown the darkness, not the light of God. It was only the sound of giant roar that actually awakened him. He looked in this endless void to see a creature appearing before him. The creature was moving towards him, where he can see that it was 100 meters tall. Once it came close enough, he saw that it was a great big red dragon, great red. Seeing the dragon, he figured he was going to be killed or eaten by this giant reptile. With no weapons in his hands, he intended to live not just for his sake, but for his siblings, and to fight against the war that was happening back home. In that moment, the feeling he had before, mental balance breaker activated again. The dragon appeared and opened its mouth where the young man just readied himself. The blonde warrior barely maneuvered himself and delivered a strong punch at the snot, forcing him above the jaws, but started to bump all over on its back, barely avoiding the spikes it got on it. The punch that he delivered didn't faze the dragon, but it did annoy it. He turned around to see the boy was barely hanging on, but glaring right at its eyes. The dragon already knew that he could easily destroy the young boy, but his eyes showed differently. His eyes, void of fear or doubt, showed a strength, a potential of something great. The dragon glared at him, roaring right in front of the boy, but he didn't back down. The dragon saw that no matter what the boy believed that he can actually win against him. Great Red went to attack the boy again and see what he can do. The dragon went at him with incredible destructive power. This time, the young blonde was ready again, with injuries and bruises around his body. In his mind, he was ready to survive. It was then that something happened. A strange new feeling came upon him like his body was now on fire. The dragon saw that the void was letting him show his fighting spirit as his body was covered in both white and dark flames. The young blonde moved with incredible speed where he avoided the claw strike and aimed right at the dragon's head. The dragon didn't feel a thing as the boy punched under his mouth. He roared again, forcing the boy back where the beast pierced through his body with its claw. It was there that both the boy and the dragon could hear each other's heart. The dragon saw what the boy has been feeling and such, where it actually stared at the boy with respect since not only on his courage and will, but also for believing so much that he can kill it, even his current state. The boy was hearing the voices of hundreds of thousands of people having similar thoughts, those from the Catholic faith. Why am I suffering like this? I have prayed and worshipped so hard and yet God hasn't answered my call to help me. Why am I not blessed? Why can't have peace in my life? Said a male voice. I thank you, Lord, for giving me strength to keep my family happy. I hope that you watch over my family and keep us safe, said a woman. All this fighting, does God even care on how much destruction that the devils and monsters having been doing to us? Why is there so much death to so many people, especially among the Catholics? Said another voice. The people that thank God that brought them peace and asked for a protection, while the others who weren't blessed because their prayers weren't answered, responded with hateful tones. Other people who weren't part of the religion wanted someone to bring peace, while other wanted revenge for all that been taken. The thing in common with all these thoughts were that everyone in the world wanted peace and happiness. But, because so many had their own faith and beliefs, it was so hard for them to actually to do so, since none had the courage to do anything about or didn't know on how to achieve the power to help them out. As the blonde was close to death where his consciousness faded, the dragon had another thought. In its wisdom, don't know how much, he gave the boy some of its power to him, where it healed him completely. Then out of that power, it gave him a fang where he would let the boy heart decided on it. The blonde warrior wanted a sword to protect, but also help him protect him to survive the war that was happening, to help mankind bring peace, and to take revenge on what's happened to them. To put an end to all this senseless fighting and death, where the fangs started transforming into what he wanted, where a hidden secret was embedded into the creation of something powerful, where it was taking in not only his feelings, but also the people's wishes and hatred. It transformed into a sword with hidden ability in it. The sword had a silver handle design with gold bands. In the center of it, 2 golden pentagrams overlap each other. The blade itself was sapphire azure color design on it with straight curve edges with 2 gold diamond design in the center and near the tip. Eternity Sword Quest Wiki. Morning, the sun was starting to rise as light wind spread out on the empty battlefield. In the battlefield, the young blonde siblings were walking around the field to see they can find their little brother, while also looking for supplies. They hoped that their brother was alright and prayed that nothing happened to him. They walked around a little more where the sister found their brother's body. The blonde was unconscious where he heard the two yelling out to him from a distance. He was stirred awake where he moved and started to sit up straight. He felt like a mess, like he was hit by a bull or something powerful like that. The 2 siblings cried in happiness as their prayers were answered since their little brother was safe. The blonde smiled at them and was glad to see his older siblings alive. Just as he was about to stand, his older brother asked him something. "Hey little man, how you got that sword?" Where the young blonde looked confused. The older brother and sister pointed behind him where he looked down to see that it was the sword that appeared to him. He began to wonder if the dream he had wasn't a dream but actually happened. The oldest sibling went up to pick it up. "Well, how you got it doesn't matter. With this sword, we can trade this thing to help get us some supplies and get another sword and new shield," the older sibling said as he touched the sword. The next thing that happened is that his hand was burned slightly where he was shoved back by the clamoring sword. "Brother!" Both yelled where they went up to him. He said he was fine, but wondered on why the sword burned him. They all thought that the sword must be magical and wondered on how their little brother got it. The young blonde looked at the sword before going up to it. They tried to stop him, but the blonde simply picked up the sword, where it glowed ominously. The sword disappeared from their sight. The boy wondered on how it disappeared, but this time focus hard where it appeared again in his hands. "I guess this sword must be mine," the blonde stated. After that, the 3 left to continue on with their lives, where the blonde practiced hard in mastering his new sword. At one point, he decided to leave his siblings, saying that he is going to help end this war that God and Satans have been fighting. At first, they thought he was nuts, but saw that he was serious. They told their younger brother good luck, along on where they are going to live in for now on. For the next 3 years, he trained with incredible diligence on mastering his sword. He struggled for a bit, but hired himself as a slayer against any evil demons or devils. Somewhere along the line, he made contact with the Vatican, where they offered to let him join their organization, since he held a powerful sword that God gave to him. He declined where he had a bit of trouble with them, but nothing too problematic. It was in the 4th year that everything changed for him. Several powerful fallen angels and devils had heard about the powerful sword where they went after him. A boy was pushed to his limits, since the sword's power increased his speed, strength, and ability where he actually learned on how to do some low magic, such as light, fire, lighting, and even water from traveling exorcists that hired him for some help. He was near death door, where the 2 forces battled against each other to achieve the sword. It was then that the 2 factions saw the boy glow ominously as the sword faded away, and the boy was covered in both light and darkness. In his place, he now stood fully armored, from the description that I already described. He felt powers like never before, like the armor was absorbing his will which increased in power. The boy moved with incredible speed and power, killing his would-be captors. When it was over, he stood above dead fallen angels and devils. Thus the legend of the Blue Knight was born. Present. The boy's thoughts stopped when he heard about a monster was killing people in the northern road, where travelers often come from one of the other large villages. The young blonde decided to take care of it, since he also wanted information. Night. The blonde warrior moved in the dark forest where the killing has been happening. He walked calmly on the road as he kept his guard up, waiting for whatever would try and attack him. He didn't wait for long when an attack of darkness appeared from the shadows. He dodged it with ease. He kept his cool as he could sense a devil was nearby. As he looked around, he wasn't aware of the devil, slowly, rising behind him with its nails ready to slash him apart. It was then that in an instant, the devil saw the boy in front of him disappeared and looked confused. Before he could think, he heard the young warrior. "So, you're the monster that been killing people. Too bad for you that I was nearby." The blonde would have responded, but then saw blood dripping from somewhere around him. The devil then noticed that its vision was now being separated and finally realized on what happened. "How could I lose to a human?" said the devil, where it split in half before disintegrating into dust. The warrior started to walk back to the village and announced that he slain the monster. As he calmly walked back, his was in thought on what's been happening lately. Even though now that the world is a little more peaceful since the ceasefire between the devils, angels and fallen angels have basically stopped. I keep on hearing that devils are now acting strange for some reason, attacking territories that are either habited by both angels and fallen angels. Is there something going on in the underworld? I need answers and I think I know on how to get it. I just hope that he'll come to hear my plea. He thought. Church. It took him only 2 hours to arrive back to the village. After defeating the killing devil, he went to the church since he knew he can get the information he needed from there. It took half an hour to reach the local church, where he walked inside. Silently walking in the corridors, making sure not to awaken the priest. He made it up to the mantle where he was directly below the cross. He looked at it for a bit before sighing, since he knew that he probably wasn't on the angel's good side right now. Though no, Michael and the other seraph angels, I know that you can hear me. I come here to ask you some questions. And as the one that killed your leader, I'm asking you to come out to hear me. If you need proof that it's me, and then sense this. The warrior stated as he began to let loose his power, where the candles in the church that lit up the place puffed out of existence. He waited in the dark for a bit until he felt a pure yet powerful aura appeared behind him, where a light shined behind him. The light faded where he didn't face the person, but knew who the person was, given the shadow he created with his entrance. It's been a while since we last met, asked the blonde warrior. Yes, it has been. It makes it more curious for me since I figured you would avoid places like this, answered the angel. Yeah, well, things have changed. How's that wound on your shoulder? I hope it isn't too damaged from our fight, Michael. The blonde warrior asked as he turned around to see the god's former right-hand man, Michael the Archangel. Michael is a handsome-looking man with long blonde hair and green eyes. He has 12 wings behind his back that were gold coloring instead of pure white coloring. Michael looked at the man, who still had his hood over his head, only revealing his mouth from the shadows. My shoulder is perfectly fine after some healing. But besides that, I'm wondering on why the night of life and destruction in this sacred place. Michael asked where he looked at the knight that killed God. The blue knight raised his right hand where he summoned his sword in a diagonal form where he can make a horizontal slash. Michael stood there unnerved but also kept caution on the situation. Is this the reason why you called for us to finish us off one at a time? Or is it for another purpose? Michael asked. In the shadows of the church, there was an angel hiding in the corridor to assure that nothing happens to Michael. When the sword was summoned, Michael and the angel that was hiding held their breath at what might happen. The blue knight's expression didn't change at all. It was then that he let go of the sword, hitting the ground where he brought his hands up in a submissive manner. Let that be proof that I didn't come here to fight but to talk, the knight stated. Michael acknowledged it, where he then asked for the visit. The knight asked him if he knows anything about the sudden devil attacks on the angels or Grigori territory. Michael explained to him that the underworld is currently in a civil war that started a year ago. From some representatives of the anti-Satan faction, Michael has learned that the original faction that followed the old leaders that he killed wanted to continue the war between the angels and fallen angels. The anti-Satan faction doesn't want to go to war since they want to rebuild their race from all the losses. With that, a civil war broke out against the old Satan faction versus the young anti-Satan faction. Even though the young anti-faction was slowly growing in power, the old Satan faction has experience where it's been an even battle, especially since some of the fallen angels had joined their side in hopes to help destroy the younger devils, while at the same time get rid of potential threats, which Michael personally thought. So let me get this straight. If the old Satan faction were to win against the civil war in the underworld, they're going to break the ceasefire and continue the war on Earth again. Is that right, Michael? The Blue Knight asked. Yes, if the old Satan faction were to win their civil war, then the ceasefire that we agreed on will end. With it, the angels will fight again against the devils and fallen angels if they decided to enter it. Michael confirmed. I see, so I'm guessing that it's the old Satan faction is responsible for the sudden uproar that is happening around the churches and such. The Blue Knight thought out loud. You're also correct. The anti-Satan faction has helped us by trying to take care of the matter themselves, but since these are young devils with little experience in fighting battles, it's becoming difficult for them to keep things quiet. Michael confirmed the knight's thoughts. The young knight was quiet where Michael could see that he was deep thought. It ended when Michael saw, even with the darkness all over them, the serious piercing blue eyes that he had. Michael, I have a favor to ask you, the knight asked, looking at Michael. What would that favor be? Michael questioned. I need you to give me way to enter hell. He asked with determination. Countryside. The sun was high as a gentle breeze blew all through the land. Birds and other animals are busy doing their own things, giving the current atmosphere a soothing feeling. As the terrain gave a beautiful scenery, a young man was 6 feet tall who was in his mid-20s wearing the standard clothing that the people in the 9th century would wear. The person walking down the path was the Knight of Life and Death, also called as the Blue Knight. Currently, he was traveling to the farthest northwest territory in Frankish Empire, Britannia, which was only half a day away for him. It's been a week since he had his conversation with the Archangel Michael and his request to venture to hell. Flashback. The great Archangel, Michael, who was the first angel that biblical God has ever created, couldn't help but have a look of surprise and disbelief. Right in front of him, the knight that killed his leader father is asking him to give him a passageway to enter hell, willingly. The great angel looked at the piercing blue sapphire eyes of the warrior before taking a bit of serious look of his own. Michael took a deep breath before letting go as he looked at the young man. "Why are you asking me this? What do you hope to accomplish for making such a request?" Michael asked seriously. The young warrior looked at Michael with a serious look. "I intend to help the anti-Satan faction win in their war by killing the leaders of the old Satan faction," he plainly said. "Why do you want to do that? Is it for glory or vengeance?" Michael asked. "I don't fight to make a name for myself. And I have already been through enough to forget about any vengeance that I had a long time ago. The reason I want you to send me to hell is assure the peace in this world," the knight stated. "For peace? You intend to throw yourself in the depths of the underworld where sinners and the darkest of souls are sent in order to maintain peace," Michael clarified. "Yes," the young warrior stated, where he told him that he'll go to the underworld and help end the devil's war so that human world would be safe for the time being. Even though he had his own personal reasons, he knows that by going to the underworld to ensure that the anti-Satan faction win is the right thing, since they said that on their side, major families and other high-ranking devils don't wish to continue the war since they want to secure their family's safety and such, which would take decades or centuries depending on what's going on. I see, although you must understand that the devils on either side would have their own issues against you, even if you do help in stopping the Great War from restarting again, they would still come after you for what have you done to them for the past decade," Michael said. "I already know that and I don't care about it. As long as I'm able to ensure the safety of this world, then I'm okay with it. I'll just have to sleep with one eye open," the Blue Knight stated. "And if you actually manage to survive all the way and end this world, I suppose you'll return to Earth," Michael remarked. The Blue Knight looked at Michael as he said, "I intend to survive all the way to the end, but I'm not coming back," giving Michael his answer, where Michael looked a little confused before understanding on what the Blue Knight meant. "I see, so that's the reason why you want to go. You plan on dying over there, am I right? Do you believe that by fighting and protecting both the earth and heaven would give you sanctuary? Are you asking us to allow you into heaven when you die? Even with all the sins you have done, at not just us in heaven, but also the devils and Grigori group, in order to receive redemption?" questioned Michael. "No, I don't want redemption. If anything, I wish that for my family that the angels failed to protect and my adopted family that took me in sanctuary for all of them, since they have nothing to do with this. As for me, you can send my soul to the deepest abyss or in limbo for all eternity if you wish," the knight answering Michael's question. Michael was surprised on what he just heard, and by the look of the warrior's face, he was completely serious. Michael asked on why he is making such request, on why he is sacrificing everything, even his afterlife, for his request. The young man told Michael that this world has suffered so much because of the supernatural world. So many families were separated and lost from the battles that took place here, where many had prayed and yet haven't been answered, where they all died. The young knight would have talked more about his reasons, but he said that he chose to be the guardian of the world, where he intends to protect it with everything he has, even sacrificing his own peace. After hearing the knight's plea, Michael looked at his piercing eyes to see that he wasn't lying and was willing to go try any method to reach the underworld. With that, Michael sighed as he looked at the Blue Knight. "Alright then. Give me a bit of time and I'll have everything ready for you to journey to hell," Michael answered. The young knight nodded in acceptance and said that he has his own affairs that he needs to address before leaving. He held out his hand out again, where his sword that he dropped on the floor instantly came back to his hand. Once he got his sword back, he resealed it back into his body. With that, he started to take his leave from the church. As he was leaving, Michael turned his head towards the young man and asked him something. Out of curiosity, getting the knight to stop and get his attention, "May I know the name of the one that killed my father? If not, at least let me see your face, since I haven't been able to see it through the times we were together," asked Michael. The Blue Knight turned his head, where his blue sapphire eyes can only be seen from his hood. The young man stalled for a moment before he reached for his hood and pulled it down, revealing his face. Michael and the hidden angel were finally able to see who the Blue Knight really was. They can see that he was in his mid-20s with short, spiky golden blonde hair. Small bangs of his hair framed either side of his face. From Michael's own perspective, the young man looked handsome, while the hidden angel couldn't help but blush at seeing his face. Of course, there was also something that made them curious, since his face showed that his appearance has an ancestry that didn't live in this part of world. "Now you know my face. As for my name, I had thrown away the name that my birth parents have given me. If you must call me something, call by my weapon's name," the Blue Knight stated. "And what would that name be?" Michael asked. Nexus called himself. Alright then Nexus. In 1 week's time, come to the Vatican. There is where you'll get the information on going to hell. Michael stated. Can you give me 2 weeks since I like to make my goodbyes? Nexus asked, where Michael agreed. With that, Nexus walked out the church where he can see that the moon has already began to descend back down, showing that it passed midnight and was now early morning. With that, Nexus used his power to summon a pair of his legendary blue azure wings from behind his back and flew into the night sky. As he left, the hidden angel came up towards Michael. Michael, are you sure it's alright to do this? Asked the angel. Yes, from the look of his eyes, I can see that he was very determined and serious about going to the underworld. With this, the possible danger that may come from the underworld if the old Satan faction wins might be taken care of by him. And this way, he intends to die the way he wants to. It might be an unwarranted punishment or sentence, but I believe he made his own choice. Don't you agree, Gabriel? Michael said as he looked back to the most powerful and beautiful woman in all of heaven, the seraph angel, Gabriel. Gabriel agreed. Where she looked back at where Nexus left, she couldn't help but blush a bit from seeing his face. Then flashback. As he was finishing with his memories, he noticed that he was finally here in Britannia. He quickly made his way towards the sea, since one of his most important treasures rests near the shoreline. It took him another few hours as the sun was beginning to set where he finally made it to his destination, after passing several other homes along the way, a small comfortable house that was near the ocean shore. The house was made of rocks and thick wood to ensure that it would be strong against the storming weather, as well as for rough seasons, and big enough for a family of 6 to live in. Around it were a few pins and a small vegetable farming ground. At the beach, laid a port with a fishing boat tied onto it. The thing that caught his eye, however, was the Christian cross that was on top of the entrance door. Nexus walked on the grounds as he made his way towards the main house, where he saw candlelights illuminating the home. Nexus guessed that the people inside the house were about ready to enjoy dinner. He moved towards the front of the door, hearing the voices of rowdy noises of young and old people, where he knocked on the door. The home went silent for a moment before hearing someone walking towards the door. He waited outside before he saw the door open up to reveal a beautiful young woman who was mid to late 20s. She was a few years older than Nexus, where she has brunette hair, braided, wearing a nice short-sleeved shirt and long skirt. She had very beautiful light brown eyes, who looked a bit confused before finally recognizing the person in front of her is. "Oh, you are?" The young woman stuttered out before Nexus spoke to her. "It's been a few years, hasn't Elizabeth?" Nexus smiled. It was then that Elizabeth quickly went and hugged her younger brother with a cheerful squeal. The people inside came to the door to see Elizabeth cheerfully greeting the guest. The young man, who was the same age as Elizabeth, quickly greeted Nexus with a smile on his face. "My God, it's been a few years, hasn't my brother?" said the young man. "It has been. The last time I saw you two was when this little girl over here was a year old." Pointing at the girl who looked like her mother except she has red brownish hair. "It has been. Kids, come meet your uncle," the young man said, where the kids cheerfully ran up to him where they hugged him with all their might. "I hope you've been taking care of my sister, since you know that I, or our brother, would make you regret it, Aaron." Nexus joked at him. Aaron is the same age as Elizabeth. He was the same height as Nexus, where Elizabeth was half a head shorter than them, while having short bright red hair. The story behind this is that Nexus helped Elizabeth and their brother look for a home in Britannia 10 years ago. During that time, she met Aaron, where both hit things off as friends. It was later, before Nexus announced that he was leaving home for good, that they both grew close. Nexus came back to their wedding a few years later, where many friends and Aaron's family rejoice off their union. Nexus later visited again, where he found out that she had a baby girl named Joanna with Aaron and couldn't be happier for her. "I see that you now have son. I'm guessing that he's only 3 or 4 years old," Nexus said as he looked at the light brown hair boy. "Yes, his name is Michael, after the Archangel Michael," Aaron stated. Nexus said that it was a lovely name. Joanna said that she hoped that the Archangel Michael would not only watch over her younger brother, but also them like God. Nexus agreed, where he inner thought about keeping the Lord's death a secret. "Dinner is about to be served, how about you come and join with us?" Aaron suggested, where Nexus humbly agreed, since he said that was the reason he came here, where everyone laughed. During and after dinner, Elizabeth and Aaron asked Nexus about his life on being an exorcist. A while back, Nexus told them that he became an exorcist for the church and did missions that heaven has asked him to do during the Great War. Of course it was a lie, so they wouldn't know what he really did. "Oh, it's very dangerous when fighting against sinners and dark beings. But with all my faith, God helped protect and gave me strength to overcome such obstacles. Because of all my hard work, determination, and faith, I was finally able to see them," Nexus explained. "Them?" asked Joanna. "I saw the archangels, Michael and Gabriella," smiled Nexus, where the family looked at him with astonishment. They began to ask him questions about how they look like, what type of personality they have, and such. Nexus told with a smile on how they look like, where they looked envious on being privileged on seeing them. The reason why is because this family is also follower of God himself, Catholic like Nexus used to be. "You're so lucky, uncle. I wish I can see both of them, including God," Joanna said. "I actually got to see God himself, well actually just his figure from a distance," Nexus said, where everyone looked wide-eyed at the young man. Nexus began to explain that he helped in the final battle against the devils where God fought and won against the 4 Satans, but got hurt himself. He told them that he saw God from a distance since he helped in protecting the wounded angels that fought alongside him. The family were happy to know that God returned peace to the world and defeated the Satans. Nexus told them that it was because of many people's faith that the world will be peaceful one day in the future. Nexus had a hidden frown on his mind since he practically told his sister and her family a lie. After he killed God, he decided that it was best to keep it a secret from everyone since he doesn't know on what would happen if people knew about it. He didn't even want to think on what could possibly happen, so he decided for himself that he'll keep that bit of information to himself and take it with him into his grave. Later. Underneath the shimmering stars, Nexus walked on the beach that was close to his sister's home. He comfortably walked alongside the coast, enjoying the light breeze that the sea gave him. He walked for a bit more before he stopped as he closed his eyes. He slowly opened his eyes where he turned his body and gaze towards the ocean. "I know that you've been following me for the past few days, so you might as well come out now," muttered Nexus, where he waited for a bit. It didn't take long before a bright white glow appeared behind him. He turned around to see that it was one of the top 4 seraph, Gabriel. Nexus looked at Gabriel with curiosity since he wondered on why she was here. "Hello Gabriel, why have you been following me for the past couple of days? Are you here to tell me that Michael has finished with the arrangements?" Nexus asked. She shook her head to tell him that Michael hasn't completed his request. Instead she looked at Nexus with a bit of bitter, upset, angry look, where Nexus was wondering on why she was looking at him like that. "What's with the look? You look like you want to strangle me or something like that," questioned Nexus. Before Gabriel could say anything, she saw Nexus look startled as he looked back where he walked. She waited for a moment before seeing him look back at her with concern on his face. "Gabriel, please pretend that I work for the church," Nexus asked instantly. What?" she stuttered in surprise. "Please, the family I'm with doesn't know anything about me. They don't know about him being dead. So please keep it a secret and pretend I'm exorcist," Nexus said before he went on one knee like he was bowing to her. "It's a great honor to be near your presence once again, Lady Gabriel," Nexus said. Before she could ask on why he was doing this, she finally sensed why he was so worried. She sensed that someone was approaching them, a young and innocent soul from what she can tell. It came from the home that he was staying in, where she looked down at him. It was then that she got what he wanted her to do, keep the secret of his life, just that, a secret. She quickly got into character. "No, I, as well as my brother and father, should be the one thanking you for all your hard work for these years. I know that you're having some time to yourself, so I hope you enjoy your freedom before we have to call you up again," Gabriel said. "I see, so this visit is just to thank me. You shouldn't, since I'm doing this out of my own heart. But if anything, can you watch over my family and grant them peace when they go to heaven? That's all I like, Gabriel," Nexus humbly asked. "Do not worry, I can sense the purity of their hearts. They'll be welcome to heaven, just like the little girl that is watching over us right now," smiled Gabriel as she stated, where she near the hill near the beach, while Nexus acted surprised at being caught like this by his niece Joanna. Joanna woke up in the middle of the night where she heard some noise moving around the house. She looked over to see that her uncle had left the house. She looked around to see that her family was still asleep, so she went to follow him since she was curious on why he was leaving so late in the night. She followed for about 15 minutes before she saw a bright white light glimmer ahead of her before she decided to look for herself. It was only when she reached him that she saw that he was kneeling down in front of her own opinion, the prettiest lady she has ever seen, but was also wondering on why the woman had white wings behind her back. She quietly got closer until she can hear them mutter out their conversation where she can barely hear. It was only when she heard Gabriel's name that she was stunned in disbelief, where she decided to secretly leave. She of course stopped when she overheard that she's been found out. She quickly kneeled down on both knees and started to pray for forgiveness for sneaking up like this. Nexus, acted, quickly went to Joanna's side. "Joanna, why are you doing here? You should be in bed," Nexus asked, but figured out the reason already. "I came because you left the house in the middle of the night, uncle. I was worried when I saw you walking away. I didn't know that you were meeting Lady Gabriel. I ask for forgiveness from the both of you," muttered Joanna. Before Nexus could say anything, they both heard Gabriel walk up to them with a smile on her face. "Do not worry. You're only a curious child. "It's natural that you follow your uncle even if it's a little dangerous for you to be out this late," said Gabriel as she smiled at the young child. Gabriel guessed that the child was 5 to 6 years old. Joanna felt like she had no right to look or speak to Gabriel, where she kneeled down and used her hands to cover her eyes as she muttered her apology to her. Gabriel could see that the child had a lot of love and respect for her and her father, the biblical God. Gabriel told her that it was alright and that she can look upon her. Joanna did what she was told, where she looked up in amazement on how beautiful Gabriel really is. Gabriel is an extremely beautiful woman with curly blonde hair and a voluptuous figure, where Joanna believed the Bible said that Gabriel was the most beautiful woman in heaven. She can tell from how she spoke to her that she was a humble and polite angel and can feel this warm presence coming at her, like she could feel true peace. After getting the shock out of her system, Nexus told Joanna to run back to bed since he doesn't want her family to worry about her. Joanna agreed, where she began to run back home with excitement in her heart. Both Gabriel and Nexus waited until Joanna was out of sight before going back to their conversation. But before they could, they heard Joanna say out loud to Nexus, "Uncle, you were right. You did help the angels fight against the darkness. I'm so happy that God is watching over us." With a smile on her face and new faith in her eyes. Gabriel looked hurt, where she then looked back at Nexus, who already went back at looking at the ocean. "So, you have told your family that you work for the church and have been fighting with heaven in the Great War," she stated. "Yeah, well, I can't exactly say that I fought against not only devils but also angels and God himself, since they are Christians," Nexus explained. "So, they don't know about my father?" Gabriel questioned. "No, my sister and her family are very faithful in the ways of God. I can't exactly tell them that their lovable uncle is the one that killed him now, can I? Besides, I don't want them to feel like they are carrying a burden on their shoulders. If anyone should carry that burden, it should only be me," Nexus explained. "I see," Gabriel said as she turned around and began to leave. "Where are you going? I thought you talked to me about something," Nexus asked. "I already got my answer. I bid you good night," Gabriel said as she disappeared in a white light and went back to heaven. Once she was gone, Nexus went back to his sister's home so he can enjoy whatever time he had left. It's been a few days since he was visited by Gabriel. During that time, he spent it with his family, getting to know on what's been happening, bonding with his niece and nephew, making memories with both his sister and brother-in-law. He enjoyed making all these memories with them, which was the most important thing to him, since it strengthened his resolve on what he intends to do. His 2 weeks are nearly over, where he decided to tell his sister on why he came to her and her family. Nexus asked Elizabeth to come with him near the beach so they can talk. They walked for a bit before they both stopped to see the sunset over the horizon. Sister, I have something to say to you," Nexus started out. "What is it?" Elizabeth asked. "That this is the last time that I'll be visiting you," Nexus stated. Elizabeth sighed as she crossed her arms together. "I already know that." Nexus didn't look stunned, just a bit surprised. He then sighed as he asked her on how she knew. She told him that the way he acted, the way he bonded with her family, and how he kept looking at the horizon over the distance. She guessed that he was going to do something important and that it would take him away from his family. "You're right, I am going away and I won't be coming back," Nexus replied. "Is this a request by the church?" Elizabeth asked. "No, it's more by heaven instead, which I agreed to do. In fact, I'm supposed to leave today," Nexus stated. "I see, Elizabeth started to say before Nexus interrupted her. "Don't call me that. My name is Nexus now. I've forsaken that name ever since I joined the church," Nexus remarked. "Nexus, if you are going to go away forever, then at least promise me one thing," Elizabeth asked. "What is it, sister?" Nexus asked. "Promise me that you have a happy life like me," Elizabeth requested her younger brother to do. "I don't know if I can, but I'll try to find it," Nexus said, where Elizabeth smiled for the answer. They stayed like that until the sun completely set, where Nexus told her that he needs to go now. He told her his goodbye and wished for her and her family to live happily. He asked her to give his goodbye to his niece and nephew for him, where she agreed. He also asked her if she meets with their older brother again to tell him that he's sorry that he couldn't say goodbye to him himself, where she agreed. With that, he began to walk away from her and the home and not look back. Nexus walked for a good hour before he used his power to form 2 pair of his blue wings and flew up into the air. Nexus decided to head to the place where he knew would be the best place to have his meeting with Michael, in the Vatican. The journey took him all night, where he used the stars to navigate his way. It was early morning when he arrived at the Vatican. He sneaked his way to the main lobby of the church, where he made it to the front part of it. He looked around to sense that there was no one around. When he confirmed it, he looked up at the front stage where the cross was located. "Michael, I'm here. It's been 2 weeks since I came to you. I'm here to ask you if I've completed my request," Nexus said out loud so Michael can hear me. Nexus waited for a moment before he got his response. In front of him, Gabriel appeared in front of him. Nexus was wondering on why she would appear to him rather than Michael. "I see you've arrived," she stated. "Yes, I'm curious on why Michael isn't here," Nexus remarked. "Michael is very busy since he and the other Seraph are busy in remaking the system that God had placed up," Gabriel explained. "I see, has my request been completed?" Nexus asked. "Yes, although Michael had to ask for some help," Gabriel answered. "What type of help?" Nexus was curious about. "You need to head towards Gathia. Let your power pour out of you where your help to enter the underworld will await you." Gabriel explained where she was ready to leave after giving him the information he needed to know. Wait, stopping Gabriel from leaving just yet. "I know that heaven won't forgive me, nor do I expected it, but still, thank you for letting me do this," Nexus gratefully said to Gabriel. Nexus quickly ran out of the church, where Gabriel prepared to head back home to heaven, but not before controlling the blush that appeared on her face. Next day. Nexus has flown from the Vatican to Gathia, making it by noon. He silently traveled to the most populated village town where he decided to eat and rested until night. When night appeared, he went to the highest and most isolated building in the town. When he did, he spread his blue azure wings out to let his help find him. He waited for an hour before he felt a strong familiar aura coming from the north of the village. He quickly took to the air and traveled to the source of it. It was a short trip where he made it to a secluded area, which was a graveyard. Nexus walked around towards the power was coming from. It was short walk where he then saw a small old body holder building. I'll figure out the name later. As he got closer to it, he sensed the large power coming closer to him where he stopped right in front of the structure. Nexus turned his face to the right to see who his help is, which he was somewhat surprised to see since he once spared the person's life once. Wearing somewhat noble dark clothing, stood a man who was 2 inches taller than Nexus. He looked to be in his 20s with black hair and golden bangs. But the thing that made Nexus recognize him was the fact that he had 12 jet black wings on his back. "So, you're my help in getting into the underworld, isn't that right?" Azazel, Nexus stated, where Azazel approached him with laid-back look on his face. "My, it's been a while. The last time I saw you was when you flew away with tears in your eyes as you pierced God in his heart with your sword that contained the 4 blood of the dead Satans. You've grown up," Azazel stated. Azazel breathed a bit before looking at the man in front of him. "So, I hear from Michael that you wish to get to the underworld. Why do you want to go over to that place? Are you trying to start something?" he charismatically said to him. "I heard about the devil civil war that's been going on in the underworld. I wish to fight alongside the anti-Satan faction to assure that the Great War doesn't start up again," Nexus stated. Azazel looked at the young man in front of him and could see that he was completely serious. He beepized the man for a moment or two till he sighed, seeing that he wasn't showing any doubt or fear, where he led him further away from the village and graveyard. Once a bit of distance, inside a forest, Azazel turned around to meet Nexus' gaze. It was there that he pulled out, from his clothing, a plain old silver sword hilt where he tossed it to Nexus. Nexus looked confused where he wondered what it is. Azazel saw the confusion Nexus got where he decided to finally tell him what it is. "That hilt is the key to get you into the underworld," Azazel stated where Nexus still looked confused. Azazel explained to him by channeling magical energy into the hilt, it would form a blade that would cut the dimension of the earth and teleport to the destination the possessor wants to go. It was created for the use of humans who worked for the Grigori group to get them to the battlefield or areas that they needed. Unfortunately, not many humans didn't have that much magical ability, so there was only this one hilt that was made. "And you sure that this would work?" questioned Nexus. "Yeah, I personally created and tested myself. It worked pretty well," Azazel answered with much confidence. With that, Nexus got what he wanted where he prepared to leave, but not before thanking Azazel with his key. He prepared himself to use the teleportation device before he heard Azazel to wait for a moment. "Even though I told you how it works, I still need to tell you something else," where Nexus paid close attention. "The hilt can only be used once every 8 hours. If you go into a battlefield and end it in 4 hours, then you'll be trapped in the underworld until the charge up is completed for another 4 hours, which would leave you completely vulnerable for anything over there, that's also including getting any medical help," Azazel warned him. "An 8-hour gap to enter and leave, huh?" Nexus muttered to himself. "Yep, so here's something else. This will show you a map where I, personally, put in secret bases around the underworld. You can use them to rest and recuperate when you are not fighting," Azazel said as he handed Nexus a device that would tell him where the bases are. Nexus looked confused where he wondered on why Azazel gave him this. Azazel sighed as he told him that even though they were enemies, he owed him his life since Nexus spared him a while back. He intends to repay him complete, which this would clear any debt. "But this, you're on your own," Azazel stated. Nexus thanked Azazel and prepared to leave, but heard Azazel asked on where he got his sacred gear, since it's something that he doesn't know. Nexus said that it's a sacred gear that was born by the light and darkness of humanity, in a way. He also hoped that this power will be forever lost, since he plans on taking it with to seal it away for all eternity. By the way, what's your name? Azazel asked curiously. My name is Nexus, Nexus answered. Nexus, ha well, good luck, Azazel accepted as he started to leave the area. Once explaining, Nexus activated the sword and sliced the nothingness in front of him where a large two-person gate opened up. Nexus began to walk towards the lighted gate where Azazel can see that there was no fear or hesitation in walking towards the underworld. Entering the gate closed along with Nexus' fate. As Azazel was leaving himself, he thought on what he just did. I hope you come back. After all, someone who is able to put their own feelings aside for the sake of the world is someone that this world will need one day. It would be very interesting on how things would play out if you do return. Azazel thought as he walked out of the woods before spreading his jet black wings out and flew away from the area. Tokyo Airport. It was early evening as a plane that came from the US finally lands in Japan. As the passengers make their way out of the airplane, one person couldn't help but feel like something was going to happen soon, something that will change his life. Morning. The sun was rising from the horizon as the suburban city of Kuo was starting to move with life. In the middle of the city, the students of a prestige academy were making their way to start another day of classes. The academy name is Kuo Academy, named after the city town, recently an all-girls private school turned co-ed. The academy building itself was more of a European model than a Japanese one. It had a cobbled pathway and a water fountain in the center of the courtyard in front of the school. In front of the gate was a stone bridge that stood over a water pathway that was just next to the street. As the students enter through the main gate of the academy, many students stopped walking when they heard a loud engine roar coming closer to the school, before lowering down to a hum. Curiosity soon skyrocketed as everyone saw one of the most amazing motorcycles that anyone has ever seen pass by the main gate, then parked in a parking area that was across the street from the school. It was a MV Agusta F3 with orange-white paint job. As the students looked at the motorcycle from a bit of distance, they saw the person was parking the cycle at a nearby open parking area that near the school. The person riding the bike got off and took off his helmet, where the female students couldn't help but squeal and gush, lust for some, with excitement at seeing the young man walking towards the academy. Earlier. It was Friday morning as the sun had just risen, an hour ago, as a young man was finishing a light early morning training at a nearby park. The young man was 5'9" who had short, spiky, golden blonde hair with two small bangs, framing both sides of his face, while having blue sapphire eyes with lightly tanned skin. Physically speaking, the young man was considered to be very handsome. His body was lean yet muscular, which can clearly see through his shirt. The young man is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the future heir to the Namikaze Corporation. Naruto is an 18-year-old teenage boy who, at a young age, is considered to be a prodigy. He recently moved back to Japan after being abroad for the past 13 years. The reason is his parents are the business owners of the Namikaze Corporation, that is one of the most profitable companies in Asia and Europe. Growing up while moving around the world, his parents have raised him to be a very respectable and honorable person. As a child, his parents, even with a busy schedule, has done as much as they could to raise him as a normal child, never spoiling him, but instilling important values in him, such as respect, loyalty, truth and so forth. Naruto finished his workout where he went back home, since it was near the time that all high school students headed toward school. Of course, he doesn't start school until Monday morning. The reason he wants to head to his new school was to get his class schedule and look around the academy, since he wanted to get first look of it, so he doesn't have to get lost or anything like that. He made it to his family's home, which was a two-story mansion that had several bedrooms, bath, restrooms, everything along with special types of room. Inside, there was an oval office filled with books, Detective Conan. Kudo home. Upon entering his home, he quickly made it to the bathroom that was located downstairs to take a bath. Getting cleaned, he wore sweatpants and tank shirt for the moment, as made a small breakfast of egg and bacon on rice with orange juice. Finishing breakfast, he quickly changed from his current clothes to his street clothes, which was basically light blue jeans, an orange short-sleeve shirt under a black athletic leather jacket while wearing steel-toe shoes. Around his neck was his family's heirloom, a small green-blue crystal necklace, Shodaime Hokage necklace. He went to the back of his house where he kept his motorcycle inside a garage where it also held something else. Once he got it out into the street, he quickly put on his orange-black flame helmet, hopped on the bike, and left to locate his new school. He drove around for half an hour before locating his new school, which he thought it had a great artistic design for the building. He moved around the school where he found the parking area where he immediately parked his bike. Crossing the street he walked, with a straight back, with both strength and confidence, while leaving his helmet with his bike. His face was void of any hesitation since he had a neutral look. All the girls had blushes on their face as they saw him walking into the academy grounds. They all thought that the young blonde was the strong, handsome, bad boy. The guys looked jealous since he was getting the attention of all the female students. He walked inside the main building where he looked around for a bit until he found the academy main office. Later, as classes were in session, Naruto moved as quietly around the school so not to disturb the teachers and students from their activity. Earlier, he conversed with the academy principal where he explained on why he arrived a few days earlier than schedule. After explaining his reasoning and receiving his schedule, he waited until classes started before starting to silently exploring the school with the principal's permission. He first went to find his classroom where he wandered about silently without causing any disturbance. Once he located, he left to go find the school council room to introduce himself to them, since the principal explained to him that the president would be able to help him get the details of the school. A bit of exploring, Naruto located the academy council room where the academy president's office is located. He looked inside to see that the people in the student council aren't in, which he figured that they'd be in class. He decided to wait around since he would like to get things over with and not do a round trip again. He stood by the window as he looked at the scenery over the school ground. He decided to waste the time by sketching the view in front of him. He looked around the room where he found a pencil and blank sheets of paper, along with a clipboard. Noon. It was lunchtime as the students were given permission to leave class to eat. It wasn't long before the current members of the student council made their way to the student council room. Entering it, they all saw the person sitting in the president's seat with their attention outside. The council members separated to allow the student president to move forward to see the young blonde sitting in her chair. She calmly walked up to him where she coughed a few times to get his attention where he didn't even notice it. She moved closer to get his attention only to see that he was clearly focused on the task he was doing, sketching the scenery that was in front of him while applying a bit of fantasy. It lasted a bit longer before the president poked his shoulder to break his concentration. He snapped out of his trance to look at who poked him. He turned to see a young woman was standing over him with a neutral face. He can see that the young woman was 5 feet tall where she had black hair, styled in a short bob cut and violet eyes, while wearing a pair of red glasses. Naruto stood up and looked directly at the young woman where he gave his apology about him being here. "It's okay. Although I would like to know who you are?" asked the female president. "I'm the new transfer student, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. I just came a bit earlier to get my class schedule and to tour the academy a bit, so I know what's what." Naruto introduced himself. The president looked in thought for a moment before realizing who it was. "Oh yes, I've heard about you coming to the academy next week. You are a bit early, but that's alright. Now you said you came to get your class schedule and to tour the academy grounds for a bit," the young woman said. "Yes, what's your name?" Naruto politely asked. "Oh, my name is Sana Shitori," Sana replied. "Nice to meet you, Shitori-san. And yes, I did come to get a bit of a tour since I don't want to get lost on my first official day attending the classes," Naruto explained. Sana nodded where she looked at the other council members. "Well then, Tsubaki. You don't mind showing Namikaze-san around the school a bit?" asking her vice president. "No, I don't mind showing him around," Tsubaki answered where Naruto looked at her. Tsubaki is 5'7" young woman with knee-length black hair, with split bangs and light brown eyes. She also wears blue semi-rimmed glasses with square lenses. Naruto looked at her where he bowed in thanks for taking the time to show him around. But before they could begin the little tour, Naruto spoke up first. I know that it's lunchtime right now from seeing the students eating their food around the school. So if you want to eat first, I don't mind waiting a bit longer since I don't know how much of a break you have. Plus, I can finish up my sketch," Naruto stated. Tsubaki thanked Naruto and took the offer since she was a bit hungry. The student council had their lunch while working on some paperwork. During that time, Naruto took a free chair that was in the room to finish his sketch of the scenery. Tsubaki finished her lunch in a few minutes where she told Naruto-san that she is ready. Arigato, where he then placed the sketch in front of Sana. "Consider this a thank you," Naruto said with a smile before following Tsubaki out of the room. Sana looked at the sketch where she admitted that it was very well drawn where it had not only the scenery, but also a fictional setting blend into it to give a dream world effect. "He's a pretty good artist," Sana stated where she then continued to work. The tour only lasted for 30 minutes which Naruto was grateful since he still needed to check out the rest of the town. Tsubaki escorted Naruto around to the major points of the school. During the walk, he noticed that the female body looked at him with adoring eyes, along with a hint of lust in some. It wasn't till they reached the music department that stopped the tour a little bit since he noticed the lovely black grand piano. Tsubaki watched as he slid his hand in all the keys, where he did it a couple of more times in certain areas. A couple of keys are out of tune. I can see that the outer part of the piano is well cared for, but no one seems to have taken care of the interior of it though. Naruto stated. Is that so? Then I should inform Kaicho about it to retune the piano later on. Tsubaki said before looking at him with an impressive look. I must say that you have keen ears, Namikaze-san. Thanks, I'm a pretty good piano player, although Naruto explained as he left the piano alone and picked up a violin. I'm much better in a violin or any other musical string instruments. Where he started to play it in a hip-hop version. See Josh VD promo video hip-hop violin medley PT1 without the background music. Naruto's violin playing caught the attention of a lot of students that were nearby, including those outside the building. Tsubaki had to admit to herself that Naruto's violin playing is the best she ever heard, where there wasn't anyone in this academy who can play that good. She can also see the joy that was on his face as he played to know that he was truly passionate about music. Once his little fun was over with, Naruto asked to continue with the tour. He visited all the places such as the cafeteria, library and other important areas, including showing him the outside tennis court. Finishing the tour, Naruto bowed and thanked Tsubaki for showing him around the school. She told him no problem where she took her leave, but also thanked him for the violin performance. Leaving the school grounds, he decided to look around the tree scenery since he would like to find a good place to train for another passion of his. He walked close to the old school building that was near the gymnasium. He looked around before hearing some giggling coming from some bushes. He went to investigate it where he found three guys kneeling down on all fours, looking through a window. He looked alongside them where he saw several young women changing clothing. From the outfits that were scattered around, he guessed that these girls are from the kendo club. Naruto narrowed his eyes since he values respect for others' privacy, plus he also an honorable fighter who follows the way of Bushido. He broke the three grinning boys' view when they heard a cracking sound. All three boys turned to see a pissed-off blonde with his knuckles ready to give them a beating. All three screamed as Naruto got all three of them and gave them several lumps on the head, along with several bruise areas on their bodies. The girls from the kendo club heard the screaming and painful agony that was coming outside the changing room, where a few of the girls immediately checked out the commotion. They all saw the handsome blonde give a beating to the three known perverts that the girls knew about. Alright, I think that's enough of a lecture from me. However, I believe the girls from the kendo club would like to have a word with you. Naruto said as he turned to look the girls. The kendo club girls blushed at seeing the handsome blonde where they smiled at him before turning serious and going inside to get their kendo sticks. Naruto only waited for a minute before the entire girls of the kendo club came out with their kendo sticks. Naruto quickly grabbed all three by their collars, dragged them closer to the kendo club girls, where he gently looked at all of them. Ladies, even though I gave them a nice lecture where they all saw that each of the three perverts looked up at the blonde like he was crazy, while the girls looked pleased, but I think you ladies like to have a word with him. So please don't be too harsh on them. Naruto stated. We won't, they cheerfully said to him as he tossed the three perverts towards them where they gave the three perverts another beating. Naruto walked away as the girls beat up the perverts. He decided to leave the academy and check out the city. As he was leaving, he could feel someone was watching him. He looked around where he only caught a glimpse of red hair that came from an open window from the old school building. He decided to drop it since he figured it must be some girl looking at him again. As Naruto walked past the gate, the figure that was watching him went back to the open window where they continued their gaze on him as he left. The gaze that was viewing him before once again stood at the open window to view him leaving. The person that was watching him leave had their thoughts interrupted when someone else walked up behind them. Ara, does Rias have an interest in the young man? Said the person in an amusing tone. Who knows, but I must say that he is definitely interesting to say the least, Akeno. Rias' remark. Yes, from his display of strength and beating up those three boys definitely shows that he's strong. Said Akeno. That is also true, but I'm more interested in the fact that I can sense a strange power within in him. Rias stated. Strange power? Confused Akeno. Yes, if you look closely, you can see that it's very mysterious power. Rias stated as they look at the fleeting figure. Akeno moved towards the open window to see Naruto leave. Akeno looked at Naruto's leaving figure with a keen focus eye. You're right, Rias, it is mysterious, although it would be very interesting to figure out who he really is, especially if we can see what's under his clothes in the process. Akeno said with lust in her eyes as she looked at Naruto's butt, where his jeans gave a good impression on how firm it is. Rias also gazed where Akeno was viewing, where she mentally agreed with Akeno. Monday. The weekend has come and gone where Naruto was officially ready to begin his first day in Kuo Academy. On his motorcycle, Naruto smoothly and quickly moved through the suburban city. He made it to the academy 15 minutes before it began, where he parked his bike in the same parking lot that was located near the academy. Walking on the cobblestone path, his entrance was both graceful and majestic for the female students. Wearing the boy's uniform definitely attracted the unwanted attention he hoped he didn't get. Naruto wore a black blazer with white accent, a white long-sleeved dress shirt with a black ribbon on the collar, matching black pants, and brown dress shoes. He felt uncomfortable since he preferred jeans, shirt and sneakers than the school uniform. Reaching his homeroom, the teacher greeted him with a bit of enthusiastically where Naruto nervously smiled and politely greeted him back. The teacher then went into class while Naruto waited outside a bit as the teacher wanted to take care of attendance first before introducing him. When the attendance over with, he explained about a new transfer student joining the academy for the rest of year, where he called Naruto to come in. Naruto calmly walked inside the class as he moved towards the front center of the room. The female classmates looked at him with sparkling eyes at seeing the hot new transfer student, while the few males looked a bit peeved at seeing a guy getting the girls' attention. Naruto coughed a little in his fist to clear his throat. "Hello, I'm Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. I just returned to the country after being abroad for the past 13 years. I hope we can get along for the rest of the year," Naruto said as he bowed his head in respect and curtsy. After giving his name and introduction, the teacher assigned him to sit next to Rias Gremory. Naruto obliged where he walked towards his assigned seat. He looked to see that Rias Gremory is an extremely beautiful young woman. From what he can tell, Rias is just an inch smaller than him with a buxom figure, light skin tone, and blue-green eyes. Of course, the thing that drew his eyes the most was her long crimson-red hair that reaches down to her thighs, with a single hair strand sticking out from the top. Her hair also has loose bangs covering her forehead and side bangs framing her face. Her school uniform only added to her beauty. The school uniform consisted of a white long-sleeved button-down shirt with a black ribbon on her shirt collar, worn under a black shoulder cape, and a matching button-down corset, a magenta skirt with white accents, and brown dress shoes over white crew-length socks. A moment of staring, Naruto quickly shook his head as he smiled sheepily at Rias, who giggled softly in her hand. "Ah, sorry about me staring at you," Naruto stated where he went and sat down on his desk. "It's alright, you're new here. It's a pleasure to meet you, Namikaze-san. My name is Rias Gremory." Rias introduced herself to him. "A pleasure, Rias-san," Naruto replied. Afternoon. Naruto was, currently, riding on his bike around town as he still hasn't finished exploring it. As he rode along, has stopped thinking about Rias for some reason which was strange for him since he has seen just as many young women as her. He remembered that in the past when he was 13 years old that there were many young and cute girls wanting for his attention. Though he liked the attention, he didn't really care about such things yet, where he preferred to practice either his artistic or athletic martial art skills. For the next 5 years, many teenage girls from different social standings, not to be rude about it, has tried to win his affection, yet none has ever gained it, where they only earned his friendship and nothing more. From blondes, brunettes, raven hair, redheads, to white and silver heads, from petite, curvy and buxom figures, none of the young females' charms worked on him. At some point, his parents thought that he might swing the other way, but after some conversing, he just explained that there wasn't a girl that he was attracted to women, but just hasn't found the right one. In his own words, he said to his parents, "I just want to find that one woman that I can fall in love with and want to spend with the rest of my life with, like you two are." His parents smiled at that since they can see that their son was just waiting for Cupid's arrow to hit him. Over the years after that, he has been training in any kind of artistic and athletic martial arts event he could. He played in violin, piano, art and painting competitions, while also playing in sports event either singular events such as kung fu, taekwondo, kenjutsu in both European and Asian styles, while doing team events in soccer, basketball, rugby. His studies weren't affected in all this since he maintained an A-grade point average. So, he continued with his daily life where he never gained an attraction with any woman. It's because of his past that his thoughts turned to Rias. The moment he saw Rias, his mind did a 180 where his thoughts turned to Rias for some reason. During the day, he saw many young women being friendly, while trying to put the moves on him where he acted politely towards their advances. Even around them he couldn't help but think about Rias since he admitted to himself that she was the most attractive woman he has ever seen, he couldn't help but feel like there was something more about her than she is letting on. Putting it behind his head, he decided to head home and take care of some business. Evening. Naruto was prepared to head to bed wearing nothing except a pair of sweatpants. As he was about to head to bed, he decided to look at one of his past masterpieces, one that mystified him very greatly. Returning home, he immediately worked on his homework where he finished it in an hour. Finishing his studies, he made a simple dinner where he then proceeded with a bit of light training, while watching TV, push-ups both hand and one-handed, crunches and sit-ups. Finally, taking a shower to getting rid of the sweat, he called it a night, but not before going to his art room. Over the years, Naruto has created several masterpieces of art that range from sketching to painting on canvases. His best works were brought and left in this house, since this house belongs to his family for the past 4 generations, which is renovated several times with the changing times, yet still has some features from the past. His art studio was located on the 2nd floor on the west side of the manor. The room was remodeled where there was a skyline on the ceiling, a few large windows on the wall to show the setting sun. On the ceiling, going along 3 horizontal tracks along the skyline was a lighting ceiling track system that doesn't affect the ceiling, 1 track on each end and 1 in the center. Upon entering, he turned on the lights on the dimmer to bring enough to light the area for him to see. He walked up to the center of his art studio, where he viewed his most mystifying painting. The painting gave both a loving and mysterious feeling. The background scene was a hot spring in the middle of winter setting, where snow gently fell from the sky that covered the minimal rocky landscape that was painted on. The hot spring that was painted showed a lot of third dimension like he has seen it himself. But the thing that captured him was his centerpiece that took almost half the canvas. At the bottom of the painting showed a beautiful woman with a buxom figure, bathing in the calm tranquil water, coming out underneath the hot spring, after taking a huge dip in it. Coming out of the water, on the woman's back were a pair of white angel wings. She has a creamy pale complexion that slightly matches the snow, showing how elegant and smooth her skin is. Her silver hair was let loose and fell straight all the way down to her back in a wave motion. Her arms cross each other covering her breasts as her hands gently rub her skin. Her white wings covered the rest of her modesty, while her loose bangs covering her forehead overshadow her eyes, while showing the gentle smile on her attractive face. The woman's image, drawn beautifully, was a bit blurry in some parts, such as the face and other features around the body. It showed the steamy areas where making it show that it was a realistic scene. This painting is one of only. Why am I so fixated on you? Even though I know that you're just an imagination. Naruto thought before turning back and leaving the room for the night. Chapter end. Alright, that's it for today's video guys. Let me know in the comments section how was the story, and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video. Peace out.